Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another day's hearing. Mr. Millett, we're going to hear from another witness.
We are, Mr. Chairman, yes. I'd like to invite DAC Adrian Fenton to come now to give evidence.
Yes, thank you.
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, Mr. Fenton.
Good morning.
Right, sit down, make yourself comfortable. There's water there on the table if you would like it.
Thank you.
And Mr. Millett will be asking you questions. If at any stage you feel that you need a break, just indicate and we'll take action. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Millett.
Good morning, Mr. Fenton. Could you please give the inquiry your full name?
Adrian Patrick Fenton.
Thank you. Can I just say, first of all, thank you very much for coming along to attend today and help us with our inquiries. We do appreciate it. I'm going to be asking you quite a few questions. If you don't understand any of them or would like me to repeat them, I'm very happy to do so, or to put the question in a different way. Similarly, if at any stage you need a break, we can take a break. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, you've provided the inquiry, or rather, you've provided the police with a statement dated the 4th of January 2018, and its relativity reference is MET*000800569, which should now be there on the screen. We've got two screens at the back of the room and a screen on your desk which you're looking at, so best to use that. Have you read it recently?
Yes, I have, yes.
Okay. And can you please confirm that its contents are true and accurate to the best of your belief?
Yes, they are.
And have you discussed your statement or your evidence that you're going to give to the inquiry with anybody before coming here today?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Now, we also have a note which is MET*0005290, which says that it was compiled by you on the 14th of June, which is a document we now have on the screen. It's a fairly long document, but I'm not going to show it all to you, but you say, I think, that you compiled this from contemporaneous notes you made on the 17th of June 2017.
Yes, I
That's
did.
right, is it?
Yes.
Yes. And the records were made by your logist, Watch Manager Lee Small, on the 14th of June. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And I think there's also a voice record made by yourself by mobile on the 18th of June 2017.
Yes, that's correct.
Have you had a chance to review this note recently?
Yes, I have.
You have, okay. Now, we've also got some documents. I wouldn't call them formal exhibits to your statement, but they are documents which have two separate relativity numbers. Let me go to those straight away. These are MET*000017094 and MET*000017390, and each of those is a separate clutch of documents which I want to ask you about. Let me ask you about them now, so as to get them not out of the way completely, but at least to be able to identify them. If we start with the first of those, MET*000017094, and that's the first page, which is the police evidence identifier. And if we can turn to the next page, it looks like the outside of an envelope.
Yes, that's my writing on that envelope, yes.
Okay. And it's entitled FSG Details from Control, collected by DAC Fenton, OIC in control, BCC, on the night of Grenfell Tower.
Yeah, so OIC would be in the BCC, but not the OIC of control. That would have been Joe Smith.
Yes. And if you then go to the next page and the pages that follow, can you just identify for us in outline terms what these documents are? And there's the first page, which is page 3. The details of flats and people and floors. Do you know what these documents are?
These were the documents that control staff were taking the FSG information on, and then this was passed over to Jason Olive, who was in the corner writing the information up on the dry whiteboards.
Right.
On the day, or in the morning, there was a pile of documents, and I just picked the whole pile up, so I couldn't go through it individually and say each individual one was. They were just in a pile on next to the dry whiteboard, so I just put the whole lot in one envelope.
I see. And they were already piled up, were they?
Yes.
Okay. And you just picked them up and put them in an envelope?
Yes.
Okay. And what time did you do that? Do you remember?
I would say that's probably around between 0600 and 0700 on the morning.
Okay. Were there two piles or one pile?
I can give you. They were just on the floor by the dry whiteboards.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll look through these in due course. Can I just show you the other, the other, I wouldn't call it exhibit, but the other group of documents, which is MET 000017390. It looks like a continuation, or a continuation in kind, of these documents. And just flipping through if we can just flip through the pages, Mr. Documents Director. I'll come back to that document in a moment, but moving forwards, that's page 2, moving forwards, again, looking at that page, and then the next page, that's page 4, page 5, that's on its side. Again, what are these documents?
So, not familiar with the content, however, they are the pieces of paper. They look very familiar to all the pieces of paper that were utilised on the night that I picked up at the end of the shift in the morning.
Okay. And in terms of the size of these pieces of paper, were they all A4, or were they smaller pieces of...
They were completely varied.
They were completely varied?
Yes.
Mr. Olive yesterday came to give evidence, and I showed him these pieces of paper,
yep.
And he said that, although he said the pieces of paper he was getting were smaller pieces of paper, they weren't generally, or weren't, A4 pieces of paper. What's your recollection about the actual physical shape and size of the pieces of paper that you picked up?
My recollection that there was a mixture of pieces of paper that were by the dry whiteboards that I picked up, so a range of full A4 sheets to pieces that were ripped off to half sheets, really, so a complete variation.
Okay. You have a clear recollection of that, do you?
Sorry?
Do you have a clear recollection of that?
Yes, that's what was on. That's all the papers that I've put in that envelope were all the papers that were on the floor by the dry whiteboards.
Right. We'll come to look at the details of those then later on. I said I'd come back to the second page of this second group of documents. If we can go back to that, MET 000017390, page 2. This is a list of flats, floors, adults, children, entitled Fire Survival Guidance, 14th of June 2017, with the incident number on the right. Can you identify the writing at the top?
Yes, current 0720, my signature, and I wrote that. So I asked Jason Olive to collate that information off the dry whiteboards, and then I wanted to sign it so that there was currency at what time that was signed and detailed.
Right. So just to summarise what you've just said to us, that is Jason Olive's summary of the fire survival guidance in terms of flat, floor, adults and children that he took from the whiteboards at the end of the night.
Yes, that's correct.
And then you signed it off. When you signed it off, did you verify that written list against the content of the FSG whiteboards?
No, I didn't. I took Jason's word that he'd done that as competent officer, and I shouldn't have to check that.
Okay. Well, we'll come back in due course to these documents, but thank you very much for identifying them. Can I go back to the beginning, as it were? You are a Deputy Assistant Commissioner with nearly 24 years' experience, now 25 years' experience, I think. And I think you were made a DAC in March 2016, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, on page 2 of your witness statement, if you look at it, please, 2/3 of the way down page 2, or 3/4 of the way down page 2, and I'm sorry, these statements don't have paragraph numbers and often quite a lot of block text, so we have to navigate our way through it. But what we'll do is throw the statement up on the screen and use a yellow highlight to focus on the passage. It says, throughout my career, this is 3/4 of the way down that page. 3/4, this is the way down that page. Keep going. Yeah. Throughout my career, I have trained in dealing with fire survival guidance, FSG, as an operational officer. Just pausing there. Did your training include lessons learned from the Lacma House fire?
So I've done the Lacma House fire online development programme that was put forward for all staff.
Right, pausing there. An online development programme put forward for all staff. When was that put forward?
I can't remember exact date. It was quite a while ago, but I think it would be in my training records.
I see. And you do how does an online development programme work?
It's an online system that staff go on to. I think it's within something called Big Learning, and it's like a CBT,
right?
Computer-based training.
And how often did you do that after it came out?
Where it was allocated to all staff to complete. I couldn't give you a date when that was, but that was it was action for all operational staff.
Right. All operational staff.
As far as I'm aware, so.
Right. So from frontline firefighters to the commissioner.
I couldn't be 100% sure, so right. I don't know. I'm not part of the training department. Would have allocated it out. So,
in terms of big messages, and it's difficult to ask you questions without that online program in front of us. But in terms of big messages, what do you remember were the big takeaway messages from that online Lacma House training?
I couldn't give you those answers. That training was done several years ago.
Right. Was it? I see. Several years ago. Right. Well, was it repeated after the first time you did it? No,
I haven't repeated it, no.
Okay. How soon before the Grenfell House fire did you do your online Lacma House training? Do you remember?
No, I can't give you those dates.
Did that training specifically include communications between the control room and the incident ground in relation to FSG calls?
So with the training package, unfortunately, as I've mentioned, it was done several years ago. I don't know the date of when I've completed that, and I couldn't recollect what the content was to give you details of what that was.
Let's see if we can get at this in a slightly different way. Can I ask you to look, please, at tab 52 of our documents bundle, which is the LFB's official report, main report, into the role and actions of LFB control at the Lacma House fire, dated November 2012. And there is also at tab 53 for completeness a lengthy set of annexes. Annex A is about Lacma, and Annex B is a comparison between national guidance and LFB policy and training. I don't know if they help terribly much. What I want to show you is the conclusions about the handling of the fire at Lacma on page 50. And I just want to ask you to look at paragraphs 293 to 296 of that. Before I do that, can I just ask you, are you familiar with this report at all?
I'm aware of that report, but I haven't read it.
Right. Okay, let's see how far we get then. If you look at paragraphs 293 to 296 on page 50, they're there. Can I start just by asking you about 293? Expectations that callers would be rescued and stay put advice. And in the middle of the paragraph, it says, well, I start the paragraph. COs had a clear expectation that fire crews would reach the callers quickly. Their experience was that fire appliances arrive quickly and that people are rescued by the brigade. Now, just pausing there, in your experience, up to the time of the Grenfell Tower in June 2017, that expectation, was that something that persisted, do you think? That the control room operators continued to expect that fire crews would reach callers quickly?
I would say that would be an expectation, but with the caveat that that would be probably a single fire survival call.
Right. Okay. And similarly, their experience was that fire appliances arrive quickly and people are rescued by the brigade. Was that a continuing or persisting expectation up to the time of the Grenfell Tower?
Yes, I would say so, yes.
And then it goes on, in the middle of the paragraph, as rescues by crews were not immediate, there is a question whether the CO and or callers could have assessed the risk of attempting to escape from the flat, and whether the risk of moving closer to the fire but escaping was less than staying put and awaiting rescue. COs relied on advising callers to stay put, expecting that this would keep callers safe from fire. That sharing of assessment of risk between CO and callers, or CO or callers, is that something that persisted up until the night of the Grenfell Tower fire, in your experience?
Yes, I would suggest that a control operator would be comfortable that the stay put would be the safest place with compartmentation in place.
Right. Do you know whether the lessons learnt from Lacma House led to an improvement or change in the way in which control room operators assessed or assisted the caller to assess the safety of escape?
I couldn't give you that answer because I don't know how control operators have been trained or how their training's been changed.
Right.
I'm not involved in the control side.
Okay. So, okay. If you go then to 295, well, sorry, let me look at 294. You may say the same thing, but let me just put it to you. 294, escape or alternative escape routes. Many callers mentioned that there was smoke outside their flat or that there was smoke in the corridor preventing escape. This may have caused COs to move straight into the protect phase of FSG and not explore alternative escape routes with the callers. First of all, can you help us? In your experience and knowledge, having had the training you say you've had, what does moving straight into the protect phase of FSG mean?
Yet again, that is a call operator's role, and that wouldn't have that wouldn't have been part of my training. But my understanding of the protect phase would be the 4 principles that control operators would utilise.
And those 4 principles are set out in the policies, are they?
Yes.
Right. And those are the basics of fire survival guidance, are they?
That's the principles that control operators would use.
Right. And just to be clear with what we're talking about, can I just ask you to, I'll just follow this up by reference to a policy. Can I ask you to look at policy 539, emergency call management, tab 3 of the policies bundle, and look please at appendix 3. First of all, my question is, are you familiar with this policy, this LFB policy?
I'm aware of that policy, but yet again, it's a control policy, so it wouldn't be one that I would have read.
Would you not have had training on this?
No.
I see. Because when you say in your statement, throughout your career, I have trained in dealing with fire survival guidance as an operational officer.
Operational officer, so on the operation side, so that's been on the incident ground, not in control.
I follow.
So they're 2 completely different aspects.
I see. Oh, I see. So you're dealing with fire survival guidance on the incident ground, not
on
in
the
control
incident
room.
Ground, not in control.
Okay, well, bear with me then. We may be able to take this much more shortly. But just looking at Appendix 3, so that we're familiar with with the 4 principles you're talking about, and we know what they are. That's Appendix 3, page 16 of 23. And the 4 principles, am I right in thinking, are set out there at the bottom of the page? So, essentially, escape, or identify a safe alternative escape, and then if that's not possible, assess by asking questions, and then begin to protect by providing current fire safety advice, reassure the caller and reassess the caller's situation.
Yes.
Are those the four principles?
So I'm aware of those four principles that are in our policy 790.
Right. Now, you're aware of those, but you say from an operational, not a control room point of view.
Yes.
Going back, if we can then please, to paragraph 294 of the Lacma House report. In your experience from the operational point of view, was there a change after this report in the way in which callers, in the way in which control room operators explored alternative escape routes with callers? Was there a change to the culture or the policy or the training? Do you know?
I couldn't recollect going back to that period of time what the change was, and like I say, not being involved in control operators training or in their roles, I wouldn't be able to really give you that answer.
Right. Just a couple more questions on this, and I fear I'm going to get the same answer, but I think I need to just try it with you. In the last sentence of 294, it says there's a real risk in attempting a self-evacuation from a building on fire that the occupant will move themselves into a position of greater harm rather than waiting in a safe location for rescue. That risk, did that risk change, or the assessment of that risk change, to your knowledge, after Lacma House?
So, not sure if that's changed from Lacma House, but as for ourselves, we would always look that compartmentation of a building will keep members or people safe within their premises until the fire brigade can get there to rescue them.
Right, but at a point where the building is on fire and a caller says there's smoke in my corridor or outside my flat, so that the risk of an unsafe evacuation had to be assessed, was there a change in the way in which that risk was assessed as a result of Lacma House?
I'm sorry, I can't give you a full comprehensive answer on that because it's not something that I've been involved with control.
Right. And then, let me just try one more question on 196. On 196, 296. Effective communication between control and incident command. There is evidence of information passing from control to the incident ground, and only one occasion when the details of a flat with people trapped were not passed in a timely way. Control supervisors regularly try to obtain information about the progress with the incident, particularly in relation to callers being given FSG. In line with practice at the time, there was much less information being passed from the incident ground to control about the progress of firefighting and rescue efforts. It is not clear that if COs had been given information about progress, that it would have influenced the advice given to callers. My question is, having seen that, do you know whether, as a result of Lacma House and the training and experiences of it, there was a change to the practice of how much information came back from the incident ground to control about the progress of firefighting and rescue efforts, particularly in relation to FSG callers?
So, as mentioned before, going back to Lacma, I can't exactly pinpoint for you when or how that change came into place, as in my own memories. However, as an operational officer, I know that the information back from the incident ground is something that an officer will try and do to keep control informed of progress.
Right. Okay. We'll come, I think, to a policy that may cover that in a moment, to be fair to you, to put that into a policy context. In fact, I'll do it now, actually. Could you look at policy 790, which you'll find in the policies bundle at tab 5. And I'd like just to show you the first page of this, first of all. Again, like 539, is this a policy that you're familiar with or were trained on?
Yes.
So you were trained on this one, is that right?
Yes, I'm familiar with that policy, and I've had training in certain aspects of that policy.
Okay. Now this one, as you can see from this front page, was reviewed as current on the 17th of April 2014. So this was the, as far as we know, the up-to-date FSG policy within the LFB as at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire. And I just want to show you, there's lots of it that's relevant, but paragraph 9, communication with control. Paragraph 9.1, it says, it is vital that control is kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call. The fact that control is aware of the actions being carried out on the incident ground will greatly enhance the advice given to FSG callers. And on or as at the night of the Grenfell Tower fire, were you aware that that was a policy?
Could you say that first bit of the question again, sorry? Just on the
night as at the night of the Grenfell Tower fire, were you aware that this was policy?
Yes, I was aware at the night of Grenfell Tower this was policy. However, I would just like to say on the night of Grenfell Tower, this relates very much to a single or maybe two fire survival guidance going on. That night was unprecedented. The numbers and the information coming in can change how that policy could have worked on the night.
Right. Okay, you say a single or
it's very unusual to have more than one or two, maybe top three fire survival guidance calls in one go, not the amount that we had on that night.
Do you know how many fire survival guidance calls there were at Lacma House?
Not at the top of my head, no.
It was more than one, though, wasn't it?
Yes,
yes. More than just
there was multiple, yes.
There was multiple,
yes.
Yes.
But not on the scale of Grenfell.
No, I understand that. Okay, so are you saying that this policy is fit for, in your experience, fit for one or two?
No, I would like to put an exact figure, but it's not fit for multiple numbers of the nights that we had at Grenfell Tower. That was unprecedented, and the numbers coming in to cope with that amount of information coming in was not something that is easy to be resource or manage.
Right. And then looking at 9.2, informative messages from the incident ground should also contain an update on progress relating to those specific FSG calls by both the flat stroke house number to avoid confusion. Again, were you aware that this was policy on the night, as at the night of the Grenfell Tower?
Yes, I was aware, and again, I'll relate back to my last answer.
Yeah.
Without repeating it, it relates to exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And 9.3, the outcome of every FSG call must be communicated to control. Again, that's clearly
it's exactly
policy.
the same,
Yeah,
yes.
Yes, all right. Okay, well, we'll examine this in a bit more detail, but I think the answer is would it be fair to summarise your evidence this way, that you were aware that this was policy?
Yes.
But
to put it into practice.
Put it into practice was, are you saying not possible because of the volume of...
Practical.
Not practical.
But we can, like you say, we can explore that, can't we?
Okay. Now, putting policy away for the moment, I just want to ask you one more general thing about, on the same subject. In your statement at page 3, you say at the top of the page, 3 lines down, you say this: with regards to the stay-put policy, it is advice that may, in capital letters, be given to an individual who is trapped by fire. The call operators may, in capital letters, tell a caller to remain in a flat and await rescue from crews. Now, this reflects your understanding, does it, of the stay-put policy and its implementation?
So I'm not sure why may is in capital letters. It's not something, I've no recollection why that is emphasised at that point.
Right. Okay. Would you correct this sentence, or these two sentences, in any way then?
Yeah, I would say that with regards to stay-put policy, it's advice that would be given to an individual who is trapped by fire. The operator will tell a caller to remain in the flat and await rescue from crews.
Right. I was going to ask you, because looking the use of the word may would indicate that there was some kind of choice or discretion that a call operator had. But you're saying not, are you?
I mean, like I say, why it's in capitals and emphasised to that point, I'm really not sure why that's written like that in my statement. But there is always a choice. Stay put policy is something that we look for compartmentation. However, it depends on what the fire is, what the incident is. If you're talking about a fire survival guidance within, say, a house, for example, the call operator may ask that they can lower themselves out of the first floor window. So that advice isn't set in stone in that aspect.
No, I understand. And then it goes on to say a fire should be contained within a compartment by fire doors and the construction of the building, i.e. concrete floors which will assist in preventing fire spread. It is usually safer for people to stay where they are to prevent a mass exodus and panic. I don't know how long the stay put policy has been in place, but it is well known to be national policy. Now, just on that, do you know what your understanding of stay put, as you've expressed it there, is based on?
As in, could you rephrase that?
Yes, what is your understanding that you've expressed there based on? Is it based on a document or training or experience?
So if you're saying about a fire should be contained in the compartment, that's from training, all resident or all flats. We as the fire service would expect the building to react to compartmentation and that the fire would remain in that compartment, allowing the fire service the time to attend to the building, gain entry to the building, put the fire out and rescue the persons involved.
Yes.
So that is where what I mean by compartmentation
Yes.
within the building.
Yes. And where a building where a building's compartmentation might fail, would you expect the building or the building owners to have any contingency plans or training for what to do in order to effect a partial or total evacuation?
Why would you have an expectation that it would fail?
Well, that's a rhetorical question. I can't answer a rhetorical question.
But you've asked me the same question. You said, why, if it was to fail, why?
Well, a better question possibly might be whether anyone should foresee the possibility, and if that was foreseen as a possibility, take any or have any plans for dealing with it.
So if that was a possibility, then the building should be built to suit full evacuation with a PA system and systems in place to allow the residents or the occupiers of the building to know that a full evacuation is needed. It would have to have a fire alarm. It would have to have many other fire safety points in place to support that within the building.
Right. If you take in your experience, just following that up, if you take a high-rise building where all you know about it is that a stay-put policy is in place, that's all you know about it, would you expect there to be in place also a contingency plan for total or partial evacuation?
No, not necessarily, because if the building has compartmentation, the fire should not be spreading out of the compartmentation, so there wouldn't be an expectation for a full or phased evacuation within that building, because it wouldn't be required. Because the fire should not be spreading outside of the compartment.
In your experience, have you ever, in your many years of frontline firefighting, encountered fire spreading out of the compartment of origin, or smoke, or heat?
Only from possibly one floor to the next floor, and that's what we call the Coander effect, where it may come out of a window and hug the side of the building and go back inside a window in the next floor, but not as it behaved on the night of the 14th, no.
Right. Were you aware, generally or from training or intelligence within the LFB, being quite senior, of a fire at Shepherd's Court in August 2016?
So I was aware of that fire, but I did not attend that fire.
No. Were you aware of any learning or education internally within the LFB about the lessons learnt from that fire?
Not that I could recite sitting here without looking into it.
Right, let me just show you a document to see if you're familiar with it. Can I ask you to look at the Master Documents Bundle tab 10. Now, this is a slideshow which runs to some 25 odd pages. Sorry, 38 odd pages. It's dated, or it appears to be dated, the 13th of July 2016. In fact, that's a wrong date. It was eventually produced in October 2016, after the Shepherd's Court fire in the August of that year. My first and perhaps only question is, have you ever seen this before, this slideshow before?
It does seem familiar, but I couldn't recite its content.
Right. If we can just flip through the pages, the first 2 and 3 pages, to see if this is familiar to you. If you go to page 2, you can see 3 photographs of tall buildings with exteriors on fire. Grozny, the Address Dubai, and Tamwheel Tower in Dubai. Are you familiar with, first of all, are you familiar with those fires?
I'm not aware of them, no. Not. I mean, I've seen those pictures before, but I couldn't tell you the detail of the fires, no.
No. You say you've seen those pictures before.
The slide looks familiar, so I would suggest I've seen this, but I couldn't recite or give you the exact detail.
Right. So the slide looks familiar. Okay, let's see if we can just push a bit further and see how familiar. Next page is page 3. Same sort of thing. Exterior fires in Shanghai and Baku in Azerbaijan in 2015. Looks like the 15th of December 2015. Again, are these photographs familiar from an LFB slide?
Not necessarily, no.
And then running through, there's one other slide for photographs of fires at Basingstoke and Garnock Court. And then page 5, if I can show you that is a slide entitled External Fire Spread, with a diagram which shows a primary fire and upward spread to secondary fires up the building, rapid fire spread in the left-hand box. And the point of the slide is in bold on the bottom right-hand side, where it says, it is important that the facade does not contribute significantly to the fire spread. Do you remember seeing a slide like this within a slideshow?
Sitting here, no, I'm not familiar necessarily with that particular slide.
Right, okay. Just looking then at the conclusions and see if we can take this quite quickly. If you go to page 25, general conclusion, I'll just show you this and see if it rings a bell. Page 25. There's the general conclusion in the slide. I just want to see if this triggers a recollection. As a general principle, the external envelope of the building should not contribute, in bold, to the fire spread along the facade. And then in bold, new construction material and method of construction are being used in facades with a bold, limited understanding of their bold fire behaviour, straight performance. And there is a bold need to understand, and then it says what products are being used in the facade system and their fire behaviour, and if they are used appropriately and meet the relevant guidance. These could affect the way fires develop and spread in a building. Now, that was a slideshow, or conclusions of the slideshow, created by the LFB in, we think, October 2016, at any rate after the Shepherd Court fire. Do you remember these general conclusions or anything like them being trained on, discussed within the LFB?
I would be aware of the conclusions there, but I'm not familiar or don't remember seeing that actual slide.
Right.
Now so I'm not 100%. I couldn't 100% sit here and say I've seen that slideshow.
Now, you say you're aware of the conclusions there. Do you know where that awareness comes from? When did it originate, do you think?
I think that's general experience, looking general principles, the external of the envelope, should not contribute to fire spread. As we say, with a high-rise building, we'd expect that compartmentation would remain in the building, and that in principle, why would someone put a cladding on the outside of the building that would contribute to fire spread? I think that's probably a common sense.
Now, you mentioned cladding. As at the night of the fire...
Okay, cladding or facade.
Okay, but as at the night of the fire, in your experience, was the fact that facades, cladding if you like as a type of facade, were at risk of contributing to fire spread up the exterior of the building, were you aware that was that fact known, or that risk known to frontline firefighters?
That there is always a risk that you could be aware that something could contribute, but however, as if we're talking about the building in general as in Grenfell, no, I was not aware that what Grenfell was clad in or what was around it.
In more general terms, as at the night of the Grenfell Tower fire, would you have expected frontline firefighters to be aware of the risk of fire spread up the exterior, an igniting exterior of a high-rise?
Not to the magnitude that it happened on the night, no.
At all?
No, not to that extent. Not to travel from the 4th floor to the 24th floor and I'll pick a timeline, 30 minutes. I've not got that detail, but in the rapid spread that fire went round the building, no, it would not be an expectation.
Right, that covers the extent and speed, but just in terms of the risk in the abstract, just to repeat the question in a slightly different way, as at the night of the fire, would you have expected frontline firefighters to be aware that there was a risk in any high-rise building that the exterior could ignite?
To a certain extent, as in like a Coanda effect or a gentle spread from one floor to another, but not throughout the whole building, no.
Right. Can I then ask you to look at page 2 of your statement? And I just want to ask you about who was on duty. You say on page 2, in a third of the way down, that in the role of DAC whilst on 24-hour duty, there would be 2 operational DACs and 1 recall DAC. Do you know who were the operational DACs on duty, apart from you?
Yes, it was me and Andy O'Loughlin. And Andy O'Loughlin was also the duty DAC that night, so it's a dual role.
Right, okay. And who was the recall DAC on duty?
That would have been Lee Drawbridge.
Right. And why is there a recall DAC on duty?
So should we be in the position that something escalates, or should both DACs be called out to 2 incidents, then we would recall the duty DAC to cover the operational rota or to give further cover should it be required.
Okay. And you, just a little bit further down, you say the duty DAC provides strategic direction and support with issues that arise via control and resource management centre. As duty DAC, I would deal with the issue, or if felt necessary, escalate it to the duty, and then I can't understand what it says, an assistant commissioner. Could you just explain that? Who would you escalate an issue to?
Assistant commissioner.
Right, okay. And you say that the duty DAC provides strategic direction and support with issues that arise via control and the RMC. Could you just explain a bit more about what that means? What are issues that arise via control and resource management centre?
So that would be predominantly looking at short-term and long-term planning, looking resource management centre, would look at how we distribute our firefighters across Pan London to ensure that we maintain our core strategic aims and objectives, which is providing a frontline service. Sometimes we don't have the right officers in the right place. Sometimes we will need to move officers and firefighters around the organisation to ensure that we keep the appliances on the run. And sometimes the officer of the day, control or resource management would require further direction on choices and which direction to take this. And this is basically to ensure that we maintain and maximise our frontline service during that shift.
Right. And you need software, I think, to do that, don't you? You need a computer program to be able to smooth out peaks and troughs.
Not necessarily. What, as in? So, could you confirm, as in the duty deck, or as in an RMC officer, or who?
Well, the process of making sure that you've got the right resources in the right part of London would require a software program.
So there is a software program called the Standby module,
yes,
which is utilised by the RMC, the Resource Management Centre, and that is a module that links to STARS and a lot of our other systems to ensure that we have the right skills, the right firefighter in the right place to ensure that we provide the service.
Do you remember whether that was working efficiently on the night?
So I wasn't the duty DAC at the beginning of the night,
no.
So Andy O'Loughlin was within that role. I had not been told that there was any issues with the SBM, so no, I wasn't aware.
Right, okay. Now, on page 4 of your statement, if I can just turn to the topic of your role on the night, you say there that you were called at 1:25 on the Wednesday evening. And you say, I was in bed when I received a call from the duty DAC, Andy O'Loughlin, you say he informed me that he was attending an 8-pump high-rise incident. Was that the first you heard about the fire at Grenfell Tower?
Yes.
And as one of the DACs on duty, would you be expected to be notified of the fire at 8 pumps or sooner than 8 pumps?
I'd be notified at 8 pumps because a DAC would then attend, and they'd be attending in the role of monitoring the group manager. So whether that came via, normally we internally as the DACs would phone each other and speak to each other and communicate to ensure that we're all aware where each other are.
Okay, and you say that the DAC will go on to an 8-pump fire in a monitoring officer's role for the group manager who will be in charge at that point. So just taking it in stages. First of all, at 8 pumps, is it right that a group manager is the incident, or should be, the incident commander?
That's correct.
Right. And what does it mean to take on a monitoring officer's role?
So the DAC would attend to monitor and help advise and assist the group manager in the role of incident commander, but also should the incident escalate, then we've already got the next tier of officer en route and at the incident ready to take charge, and then should the DAC take charge, then an assistant commissioner will turn up and monitor, and that continues all the way through the incident command chain.
At the moment when you were mobilised, who was the group manager that you were going to be monitoring as monitoring officer? No,
so you're incorrect there. So the DAC was mobilised as in Andy O'Loughlin, and he was the DAC that attended the incident, and he was the one that would be monitoring the group manager, not myself. So Andy O'Loughlin just informed me to say that he was going to the incident, and could he pass the duty DAC role over to me, right, so that I could then take that role from him because he was now going to be attending the incident.
I follow. At that point, though, who was the group manager in charge? Do you know?
At the time, I didn't know, but I do now. It was Richard Welch. So I knew by the time I was in my car and en route to Stratford that I heard that it was Richard Welch then. But at that period of time, no, I wasn't aware who it was.
Right. We'll come to that in a moment. So At the time when you got this first call from the duty DAC, Andy O'Loughlin, at 1:25, do you know, or did you know, who the incident commander was?
No, I didn't.
Did you ask?
No, because I wouldn't ask, because I wouldn't be attending the incident.
Okay.
That would be down to, that'd be Andy O'Loughlin's role as the DAC attending the incident ground.
Now, you then say, in the next paragraph, again about a third of the way down the page, on page 4 of your statement, I also turned my airwave radio on to listen to what was happening. At 01:31, the incident went to a 25 pump fire with multiple fire survival guidance calls. Where were you at that point?
I was still at my camp out location.
Right. And how did you discover that at that time the incident had become a 25 pump fire?
I can't be 100% sure whether that would have been via the airwave radio or whether I was paged. Unfortunately, I can't remember how I was informed. But I would have been paged at some stage by control to say it had gone a 25 pump fire. But I may have already gleaned that information prior to control getting the opportunity to page me by turning on my airwave radio and listening to the incident.
Right. You go on to say, with multiple fire survival guidance calls. Again, how did that message get to you? That there were multiple fire survival
I would have
guidance
heard them on the radio. I'm taking the assumption from when I wrote that I picked them up on the airwave radio. So I have the opportunity to turn my radio on and listen to airwave traffic between control, the incident ground and the incident commanders, and I would be able to pick up information that was being transmitted. So it's almost like a listening post.
Yes, I see. And being like a listening post, did you hear somebody say there are multiple fire survival guidance calls, or did you actually work out that there were multiple fire survival guidance calls from the traffic?
I could hear fire survival calls going over the radio at the time, and I'm taking that assumption that's why I've written it at that period of time.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a kind of fire survival guidance call you heard in the way you've just explained it?
It would have been control contacting the incident ground to say that they're receiving a call with the detail of the call.
Details being what? Can you...
I couldn't recite what I heard on the night because...
No, but the kind of thing.
It would have been from control to say the flat, the floor, and the number of persons and why and how they're trapped.
Right.
Or what the reason is for the call, as in whether it's heat, smoke.
And do you know who in the control room was sending those messages to the incident ground?
No, I wouldn't have any. I wouldn't know who the control operators are.
No. Okay. And did you know to whom they were being sent? Could you hear at the other end who was receiving them at the other end?
I can't remember where they were being transmitted. They would have either gone to an ICP or to a command unit, but I couldn't be specific at that time.
Do you remember hearing, again in general terms, whether the ICP or the CU receiving the messages by radio responded, saying confirmed or
no, because by this time I'll be getting myself ready to actually leave my premises and get into my car and attend. So the radio will be on for me to listen as in background to try and gather information going forward. But at that time I was probably getting ready to leave my house.
Right. And being the listening post and hearing these numerous FSG calls being radioed from the control room to the incident ground, what were your thoughts about the kind of incident that you were going to?
For it to go from my recollection from an 8 and I didn't hear in between to a 25, it's obviously a escalating incident of some form. This is the very early stages for me, as in me being informed. So at that stage, I'll be looking to try and gather information, but my information was limited at that stage because I've only just been remotely informed, and I'm about to call control as well. So
Yeah, and you did call control, as you say. I phoned our control room and told them that I would attend control to set up a BCC, a Brigade Coordination Centre. Control informed me they would show me a status 7 and attached to this incident. First of all, just clear this one out of the way. What is status 7?
status 7 is a status that a officer can use that takes them out of the operational cadre, as in control can no longer use them to send them to an operational incident. So Vision or our mobilising system would automatically then pick me up and send me to the incident. So it's a way of attaching me to control and the incident, but ensuring, so if it escalated and asked for another DAC, it wouldn't send myself because I already have been assigned a role.
Right, okay. And a Brigade Coordination Centre, what is that?
So a Brigade Coordination Centre can be set up. It would normally be set up at headquarters or at Merton, where control normally are, but it can be set up wherever deemed necessary. A Brigade Coordination Centre is set up to put extra management and governance in place for a large incident or event, internal event or a pandemic, and it's to ensure that whilst the event or incident is running, that the brigade can maintain its strategic aims and objectives, which is to basically, in simple terms, make sure that we provide our core business frontline whilst the incident is running and going. So it'd be looking at long and short-term planning for reliefs, communications, not on the incident ground, but externally with media, that we'd set up potentially 4 cells, pending what is required, and depend on the incident or the event or the pandemic or the reason. Could be for a business continuity reasons.
Okay. And is there a particular pump or make-up number which would trigger the establishment of a BCC?
So a BCC can be set up for, it doesn't have to be an incident, so it can be an internal business continuity reason.
Right.
So the BCC is at the discretion of the Commissioners Group and the Duty AC, Assistant Commissioner. However, as a Duty DAC, I could see that that's the direction of travel and it needed to be set up, and confirm that with the Duty AC on the night.
Okay. And was it your decision to set up the BCC at Stratford?
Yes.
Okay. And what led you to that decision?
So I'd received a pager message as an operational officer during the day to inform me that control, who are normally located at the lock at Merton, had relocated to our fallback control at Stratford, and that they were located there. My decision to not go to Merton and not go to HQ was based on the rationale that control would be at Stratford. Having worked at Stratford over numerous roles and positions over the years, I was fully aware that Stratford had the facilities to facilitate a BCC. And so I made the decision that it was best to be at the same location as control. It'll be the floor below and the room below, because we don't necessarily set the BCC up with control, because it doesn't have to be allocated with control, because, as I say, it can be for an event or a pandemic. And that was my experience and operational decision on the night.
Right. It sounds as if you had a choice to set it up at Merton, but decided not to. I thought Merton was closed. Was that not so? Well,
Merton, I don't know what was happening at Merton, so whether they were having maintenance that night or it was a general normal fallback position, I'm not aware. But Merton can facilitate the BCC.
Right. Okay. Now, that's very helpful, but partly my question wasn't as good as it should have been. And my question should have been, what led you to set up a BCC at all? Because
at that stage it was at 25 pumps, and so I knew we would need a relief plan. We would need to look at how we were going to do short and long-term planning for the future to ensure once you take 25 pumps out of service delivery, out the front line, we need to make sure that we still have strategic cover across the brigade and that we maintain the resources. And also the incident ground would ask, or via, and this would come via control, not to the BCC, but via control, whether there was resources or things that we could assist with on the incident ground. So we wouldn't get involved in the operations on the actual fire ground, but we would look at how we could support the incident and ensure, as I say, that we maintained our core business and strategic aims across the brigade.
Yes, I see. And later on in your statement, at page 12, you say, it's just below the top of page 12, third line, 3 lines down, you say the BCC was still in raw format. It was not how I would have liked it, but we did not have the staff needed to set it up fully. Can I just ask you, what didn't you have when you set the BCC up that you would have liked to have had?
So the BCC would be run by myself. I would normally be down in the BCC to run the Brigade Coordination Centre, and then I would have officers in place to support me and to run the cells within the BCC that were required. On the night, I had to reprioritise my role and my position, and could see that I needed to remain in control, which isn't a position I would normally be in. And also, at numerous times, I had officers that were facilitating the cells in the BCC, but I had to strip them out to prioritise what they were doing and get them to do some other roles that were required. The BCC would more come into play further down into the incident, as in supporting going forward. As we went in, we had 40 pumps there at that stage. We would have gone into putting 20 further pumps in. We would have had to look at 9:30 the next morning, the change of shift. Where were the staff? Did staff turn up? They had no fire engine then, because it was now at the incident ground. We had something we called standbys, direct and indirect standbys, which is part of RMC, moving staff around. So without drilling really into the detail of what the BCC would do, it's looking at the logistics, the resources, and what is needed to maintain our business during the incident, right, but also supporting the incident with the resources that they needed without stripping out the fire service.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned a few times the idea of cells.
Yep.
And you said there were 4 cells, and one of the things you said was that you didn't have support officers to run the cells within BCC. What are cells?
So there are 4 cells. They have 4 functions. You don't have to set them all up. You set what is required on the night. So you would have a communications cell, resources and logistics cell, operational cell, and a planning cell.
I see. Okay.
And these 4 cells will support the brigade pending on what the requirements is, because every BCC would be different, because it depends what the requirement is and what it's been set up for.
And would any of those cells, for example, communication or operational, assist the communication between the control room and the fire ground?
No.
Right. Looking at page 4 of your statement, can I take you to the last paragraph? And you say there, at the same time, let's run back to page 4, at the bottom of the page, at the same time, another colleague of mine, Steve Leader, heard my radio noise and came in to speak to me, you say. And you say, you gave him a quick brief, told him there was a 25-pump fire. And then you say, I asked Steve to open my laptop and look at our BOSS system. Now, did you ask him to communicate the information from the BOSS system to you?
No. So the BOSS system is a remote part of Vision. So Vision is our mobilising system, and BOSS is a system that senior officers and other members of staff can remotely access. It is a viewpoint only, so you can't change it, alter it, or put any information into it. It's purely for data for us to look at, and we can gather. So if you were as a remote monitoring officer, you could gather information of how the incident was progressing, what size the incident was, location. Just it's purely for data only.
Okay. Now, at the time you asked Steve Leader to open your laptop, where were you?
I was still at my camp out house getting ready to leave.
Right, I see. I was going to ask you, why couldn't you open your laptop and use BOSS to look at what was on the
Because I was getting ready to leave the premises to attend Stratford, and I was utilising Steve as he was there to gain as much information as I could without delaying my departure from my camp out base.
So he opens his laptop, looks at the BOSS system, and that would have enabled you to look at what was on Vision. Is that right?
Yes, to a certain extent. But in that circumstance, to be honest, I'd left the premises before I'd gained, because I needed to get away. I was just trying to utilise every avenue to gain as much information as possible.
Yes, okay. And you go on to say, this is at the bottom of the page, this is to get an overview of the incident, and I can look at this system remotely from my laptop, which is what I did. So just to be clear, did you look at your laptop or did Steve look at your laptop?
No, it was my laptop, and Steve was opening my laptop to get the information for me whilst I was getting ready to leave the premises. By the time he had logged on to the system, I hadn't gained much more information, and I had left the premises by then.
Okay, because when you say, I can look at this system remotely from my laptop, which is what I did you?
No, so as I said, went to open the laptop, turn it on, put the system in place. Steve Leader went to open it. By the time we'd got the system up and running, I'd not had the time, or did not sit there and look at the information. It would have been more for him to open it up and relay it to me as I was leaving the premise, but no further information.
Okay, and did he relay information to you as you were leaving?
No.
He didn't, okay. So, at what point did you leave, do you think? Let me ask it a different way. How soon after being told that there was a 25 pump fire in progress did you leave your camp out?
I couldn't give you a specific time scale. There would have been a phone call to control, a phone call to Andy Rowe to inform him that my decision to do the BCC and head to do it at Stratford and head to Stratford. He told me he was attending. I would have got dressed, grabbed my airwave radio, keys and bits, and left the premises.
Right. Okay. And what did you use? What communication device did you use to call control?
It would have been my mobile phone.
Your brigade mobile?
I would suggest so, unless I asked Steve to phone them on his mobile. I really couldn't confirm, because he was assisting me as he was there to leave the premises.
And that call would have gone through to what communication line or device within the control room? It would have,
I would have either phoned one of three. It would have either been the paging, which is an admin line, Officer of the Watch, which is an admin line, or gone to control itself. Sometimes I will phone the Officer of the Watch as duty AC, because their normal control and paging lines are normally busy with them dealing with other officers trying to book in.
Right. At the moment you left, do you know whether you knew who the incident commander was?
I would have known that Andy O'Loughlin would have been en route. I'd known it had gone to a 25 pump fire, which means Andy O'Loughlin would have taken over when he got there. However, at a 25 pump fire, then Andy Rowe would have taken over when he got there. So at that stage, I didn't know that Richard Welch was even on scene. I didn't know who the group manager was at that stage.
Right. Okay, and at the top of page 5 of your statement, you say, a short while later, sorry, I should just go back, I'm so sorry. You say at the bottom of page 4, I called Assistant Commissioner Andy Rowe to let him know what I was doing to attend control and set up a BCC. Why did you call him?
So I've now been given the role of duty DAC, and he was AC1. So knowing the size of the incident, AC1 as it's Assistant Commissioner 1, he would have been going to the incident. So I was just informing him that I would be setting up a BCC to support the brigade throughout the duration of the incident.
Okay, and again, did you call him on your mobile?
I would suggest so, yes.
You don't remember precisely?
No, I would suggest at that time I'm at my camp out, so it would have either been via my mobile or Steve Leader's, but I'd suggest it would be mine.
Right.
Or Andy Rowe could have called me.
Okay. And you then say at the top of page 5, a short while later I left my camp out base, and whilst en route, AC2 Richard Mills called me. Who's he?
So, as with the DAC DAC system, we have 2 operational DACs, and as mentioned, one is duty DAC, and then also we have a recall. The same with the Assistant Commissioners, so they will have AC1, who is, you could say in simpler terms, like the duty AC, but would also attend the incident, and AC2 can be stood up should AC1 attend an incident, and then they stand into the role of the AC1.
Okay. And then you go on to say, did he call you on your mobile, or did he speak to you over the airwave radio?
No, we wouldn't have conversation over the airwave radio, because that is for the operational incident, and we would take up airwave traffic, okay, which would be needed to be prioritised by the incident ground.
Right. Was your airwave on?
Sorry? Was
your airwave radio on and receiving messages?
I would say it was on. However, if I'm on the phone, then I would have turned it down to do the phone call.
In the first sentence of the next paragraph, 5 lines down from the top of page 5, you say, during the journey to Stratford, I had my radio on and could hear the incident escalating. What radio was that? Was that your airwave, or? That
would be my airwave. So a senior officer's airwave is a handheld radio about so size with an aerial, so it's portable so that you can listen to it whilst mobile.
And you say, I could hear the incident escalating. What could you hear?
I could just hear a lot of radio traffic to and fro. I couldn't be specific what was coming back, but you can generally pick up that an incident is escalating by radio traffic to and fro control and the incident ground. Right.
Could you hear that traffic between the control room and the incident ground on your airwave radio?
Yes.
You could. So that's the same listening post you described earlier?
Yes. So my airwave radio is what I described as a listening post at my camp out base.
Would that include messages being sent by control to the incident ground on RT4, channel 4?
Yes, that would have been RT4.
Right.
So that's the airwave, that's the listening, that's what I was listening to.
Okay. Could you, if you wanted to speak to control on RT4, could you?
I could do, but it wouldn't be appropriate, because RT4 you can only have one conversation at the time, and the priority has got to be the incident ground and the appliances that are attending and dealing with the incident. So for me to do an admin call or a call on RT4 would not be appropriate.
Okay. Is that so? Yes, you say you can only do one call at a time. That's true, is it, of RT4?
Sorry, could you say that again?
You said in your last answer that you can only have one conversation at a time on RT4.
Yes.
Is that the same for Channel 1 as well?
Yes.
I see. Now, when you say I could hear the incident escalating...
Do you mean, so Flonops Channel 1?
Yes, I think it is Flonops.
Yes, on the airwave.
Right. Yes, on the... Okay. You say I could hear the incident escalating. What could you hear about the incident that was escalating?
It's just general radio traffic. So at that time in the morning, and it's just I really can't be specific because I can't remember what the traffic was at that time. But there was a lot of radio traffic going on, and that's when I say escalating. I'm talking about my journey in general from my camp out base to arriving at Stratford.
And
so that's over probably a 20-30 minute period.
yes, we'll come to that after the break. Just, Mr. Chairman, if I can let us ask one question.
Well, you can go a bit longer if you want to.
All right, thank you. Do you mind if we go a little bit
As long
longer?
as we have a break in about 10 minutes.
Very
I'm
good.
more than happy
you
to
quite
carry on.
comfortable still?
Yes, I'm
Right,
happy to carry on.
let's continue. Thank you. Yes, so you left, just to try to get a time frame on this,
Yes.
after it had become a 25 pump fire, which we know was at 1:31,
Yep.
and it took you, you say 20 to 25 minutes to get to Stratford.
So I wouldn't say I walked straight out the house at 01:31
No.
at that period of time. So I left the premises and at whatever time it took me to get ready and walk out and leave.
Right. And then it took you 20 to 25 minutes to get to Stratford. So that was
That is an estimated time, so I couldn't be 100%. And like I said, there were a few phone calls that I made with Control, with Andy Rowe, prior and as I was leaving.
okay. Do you remember hearing that Group Manager Welch was now Incident Commander?
So en route, I did hear make pumps 40.
Right.
And that did come from Group Manager Welch, yes.
Okay.
So I heard that probably in between trying to make phone calls on the way whilst the radio was on.
And how close do you remember you were to Stratford when you heard make pumps 40 and Welch being IC?
I would suggest probably on the A13, and that's just a guess. That's just an estimate in my mind.
Okay, on the A13, I'm not sure that quite does it for me. Can you
Not
give
specific
us
enough.
No, it isn't. How long before you arrived do you think you heard the message, make pumps 40 and Group Manager Welch, now IC?
So I would suggest that's quite early on to me getting in my car and going up the road. Probably 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
And I've got to be completely honest, that is purely a guesstimate. I really can't pinpoint, and I wouldn't want to pinpoint times for you because I can't be specific on that.
I understand. I mean, we have in the short incident log a time mark for those messages of 020341 for pumps being made 40 and 020420 for Group Manager Welch being
Sorry, what times were
Incident
they?
Commander. 0203
Right.
and 0204 roughly.
Okay.
So before 2:05 in the morning. Now, before that, did you hear, while you were en route, fire survival guidance messages going from Control to the incident ground?
Whilst en route, I was making several phone calls at the time. So I was heading to the BCC and I was trying to mobilise other officers and other staff to ensure that I had them there as early as possible to assist. So my radio at some stages was probably turned down while I was doing these calls.
Right, and you were making calls on what device?
So a hands-free device.
Hands-free, okay. All right. So your radio was turned down. Even though it was turned down, you say in your statement you could hear the incident escalating.
Yes, and that's, as I've said, so I would have heard a fire survival guidance or some as I was going. I would have heard make pumps 40. There was a couple of bits that you can pick up as you're making calls in between.
Right.
However, my radio was turned down at that time because I was trying to mobilise other staff to get to the BCC so that I could get things up and running as quick as possible to support.
Okay. Can I ask you to look at the short incident log, tab 23 of the documents bundle, and turn to page 19. And I'm not going to take you to any specific messages, but we can see throughout page 19, which starts at the top at 01:35:36, so after pumps made 25, which, as I said before, was at 0131. So either you've left or you're getting ready to leave. We can see, if you scroll right down the page, you can see numerous messages passing from the control room to the incident ground. And we see that on this document as service requests created and completed. Do you see that?
Yes.
First of all, would this be the sort of information that you would have been able to see if your laptop had fired up in time and you could use the BOSS to look at the vision system?
Yes, it would have been that sort of information, but obviously that would have meant I was remaining at my premises and not making myself mobile and attending where I was ordered to attend.
Yes, but then looking at that page and then turning to the next page, page 20, running from 0146 to 0155 and so on to page 21, again, loads of messages. Are these the kinds of messages that you remember hearing even in the background on your airwave radio en route to the incident?
Yes, I would surmise that I would have heard some of those messages, but as I said, you know, making the calls and speaking to officers and staff en route, I was prioritising what I needed to do for my role, which was to set up the BCC.
Yes.
And that is the role that I'd been mobilised for and tasked to set up and do.
Right.
So that was my immediate priority at the time.
Were you aware at that time or during that journey that the Metropolitan Police had called a major incident?
No.
Okay. Now, in your witness statement on page 5, you say, a quarter of the way down, on my way to Stratford, after mobilising myself, I took the decision to self-mobilise Steve Leader, asking him to perform the role of setting up the BCC. What does self-mobilise mean?
Yeah, probably not the right terminology, self-mobilise, but so all officers or all staff that are mobilised to an incident are all done via control. So our control, so it's all done in one place and one person or one that is in control has that overview of where all our operational officers are.
Oh, I see.
I could see that I needed to get staff there as quick as possible to set up the BCC. Steve Leader is a competent group manager. I've known him quite a while. I knew that he could facilitate and set up a BCC. So I phoned him up, knowing his location to the incident, that it was unlikely that he was to be mobilised by control. I phoned him up, told him to mobilise to Stratford, to assist in setting the BCC up. Told him that he could come on the blue light, that I'd given him permission to do that. However, should control page him during his journey to Stratford, he was to prioritise the call from control and go to the incident, but to let me know once he'd prioritised that control, and then I would reallocate that role to someone else. Now, knowing how busy control were with the make-ups and the FSGs, I was trying to take some of the work away from them and also to set up the BCC at the quickest and most expedient way.
Now, you say in your statement that you took that decision to self-mobilise Steve Leader on the way to Stratford.
Yes.
Had anything changed between your being paged initially and leaving the house, or the camp-out base, and being on the way to Stratford that meant that you now thought that you needed Steve Leader in the role of setting up the BCC?
Nothing specific apart from, as I say, the general escalation.
Right.
That is the points that we were speaking about. So I don't think there was any particular trigger, just in my own mind. Right. I wanted to get the resources there as quick as possible, and I knew control would be busy, and so I decided to do that off my own back and authority.
Did you make that decision to mobilise Steve Leader before or after you'd heard that the fire had been made up to 40 pumps?
I couldn't confirm.
Okay. And what about before or after hearing that Group Manager Welch had become Incident Commander?
I only knew that Group Manager Welsh was in charge when I heard Mate Pumps 40.
Right.
That was the point that I knew he was in charge.
What I'm trying to get a feel for is what was it about the escalation that led you to decide that you needed Steve Leader to set up the BCC?
It did. So the incident was rapidly made up. There were multiple fire survival guidance calls, and I could just see that it was an escalating incident. I had no detail of the incident, but I just could see that there was going to be a need for the BCC to support the incident going forward.
Because you left your camp-out base at a time when it was already 25.
Yes.
Didn't go 40 until 0204 or 0203, while you were still en route. And I just wonder what it was about the incident that led you to say to yourself, well, I need Steve Leader now to set up the BCC.
So it was, like I say, it was the number of FSGs coming in, the escalation, the rapid escalation of the incident,
Right.
going up to 40 pumps. And also, it was just in my own way of working, I wanted to be as efficient as in getting the officers there as quick as possible.
And
Mr. Millett, I'm wondering if we're getting to a good point, are we?
not really, but we can stop now. Yes, I think probably is a more diplomatic
I think we
answer.
might all benefit from a short
Yes,
break.
certainly that.
Mr. Fenton, we're going to have a break now.
Thank you.
Please don't talk about your evidence or anything related to it
Yep.
while you're out of the room.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Can I go with the usher?
Yep.
We'll resume at 20 to 12, please. 20 to 12, please. Right, Mr. Fenton, ready to carry on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Fenton, thank you for coming back. Can I just ask you about an earlier answer that you gave to the inquiry when I was asking you about compartmentation and the contingency plan, or a contingency plan for full or partial evacuation? And you remember we had an exchange this morning about a rhetorical question. And it's page 25, lines 6 to 12 of the current transcript. I just want to revisit your answer, where you say that, and the gist of it is that if the building has compartmentation, then fire shouldn't be spreading, and you therefore wouldn't have an expectation, or you say there wouldn't be an expectation.
I haven't got it up at the moment.
No, you haven't, and I'm not sure it's possible for me to display parts of the transcript at the same time, but take it from me that you said that there wouldn't be an expectation for a full or phased evacuation. I just want to be able to explore that a little bit. Are you saying, first of all, that it is a general assumption by incident commanders that because high-rise buildings are built on the basis that any fire would be contained in a compartment, so fire shouldn't spread out of it, an incident commander would not expect to have to undertake full or partial evacuation?
That is correct, because first of all, how would the incident commander communicate that information to every person or occupant within the building to actually inform them that we were doing a full or phased evacuation? Secondly, is the building suitably built to facilitate that? And if the building is built to facilitate that, I would suggest that it would have an intercom, or it'd have a fire alarm, and it'd have the facilities there to actually be able to facilitate a full or phased evacuation.
Well, those are valid questions that arise, but in terms of general expectation, you asked the questions, I think, rhetorically, in answering my question negatively. In other words, you would not expect there to be a full or phased evacuation, because otherwise you have these difficulties.
Yes.
Can I take you to policy 633, which is in the policy bundle at tab 4, and I just want to show you one part of this. Just show you the front page if I can to start with. This is high-rise firefighting, policy 633, and this was current as at 1st of June 2015, so current as at the night of the Grenfell Tower fire. And can I take you to, well, first of all, can I ask you, are you familiar with this policy?
Yes, I am.
Can I take you to page 14 internally and paragraphs 745 and 746 under the rubric evacuation? And the policy says the IC should consider, following the evacuation plan devised as part of the occupier's fire risk assessment, unless the fire situation dictates otherwise. It may, and in 746, it may be necessary to undertake a partial or full evacuation in a residential building where a stay-put policy is normally in place. Now, this policy indicates that that is something that an incident commander should be considering. In the light of that policy, is it really right to say that there wouldn't be an expectation on the part of an incident commander to have to undertake full or partial evacuation?
I would say partial evacuation, pending on what we call partial evacuation, depending if we're talking a floor or we're talking 2 floors. That's probably a feasibility. Depending on the size of the high rise, depending on the size of the fire, depending on the situation, then yes, a full evacuation, if possible, could be implemented, but it would depend on the building, the size of the fire, all the considerations and all the factors that the incident commander would have to put into play. So I was looking at the situation with the actual incident on the 14th, and how we would have communicated that to all residents at the time, I'm not sure. But that would have been, as we say, a consideration for the incident commander, who has all that information at the time.
So I think the answer you're actually giving me is that actually an incident commander would have to be alert to the need to undertake either a full or a partial evacuation.
It could be a consideration, but as I did say, and I will say again, it depends on the situation, the circumstances, the size of the building, number of floors, where the fire is, and what the situation is at the time.
Would your expectation be that any high-rise building would have an evacuation plan devised as part of the occupier's fire risk assessment?
That is a possibility. I wouldn't know what every building or what their risk assessments are.
In terms of your understanding of policy 745, which refers to the evacuation plan devised as part of the occupier's fire risk assessment, in your experience as a DAC and having had the training and knowing about this policy, would it be your expectation that a high-rise building such as Grenfell Tower would actually have an evacuation plan?
Not for the entire tower block, no.
Right.
Because I don't. I mean, in my understanding, I don't know how you would communicate a full evacuation to 24 floors of a tower block.
But 746 says that it may be necessary to undertake a partial or full evacuation.
And as I mentioned previously, it would depend on the size of the building, the height, what facilities are also there. Is there an intercom? Is there are there twin staircases? Every building would have, and can, yes, there can be for a building, but not necessarily how it would be implemented in every building.
Right. So in the case of a building where there may be difficulties in undertaking a full evacuation, what would you expect an incident commander to do or to consider?
If an incident commander was to consider full evacuation of a building, they would have to consider the escape routes, what routes, how would we get the personnel out of the fire, where is the fire, would we be putting people into a more dangerous environment, where is the smoke travel, where's the heat. Every situation would be slightly different. Is there a single staircase, is there a dual staircase? Would the firefighters, would they be actually in the escape route, or not the escape route, wrong word, would they be in the staircase actually doing firefighting operations? So all these would have to become part of the incident commander's plan to put that into a considered option.
Yes, and in order to form part of the incident commander's plan, would you expect all the answers to the questions you've just listed to be immediately available to the incident commander on the fire ground?
It's a possibility, yes. I mean, it depends yet again where they are and what the premises are. So there are, that information can be gathered by the incident commander.
Would you say it's a possibility, but would you not then expect that an incident commander would immediately have all the answers to those questions at his or her fingertips in order to be able to consider alternatives to firefighting?
Yes, they would need them at their disposal to make those decisions.
They would. And where would you expect an incident commander to get that information to answer all those questions from?
So they could look at the operational risk database, depending what information is on there. They could look at a premise information box on the side of the building. There could be information on there, and also potentially from if there was local building management in place, they would be able to give further information. So it's all about information gathering.
And so are you saying that the operational risk database or a premises information box, or both, would or should normally provide information which would answer all the questions you listed for us a moment ago?
It could do.
When you say it could do?
It could do, because I can't be specific, because I don't know what's on every single ORD or every premise information box. So, yes, it should be some form of information will be in there, but I can't give you the details of every single premise across London and what information is in there.
As a matter of practice, and in your experience as at the night of the fire, would it be your expectation that a high-rise building and the plans for it and the ORD information for it would contain that information so as to be able to equip an incident commander with the relevant information?
There would be information in there, yes.
Would be or should be?
Should be, yeah, there would be information within the both.
And while we're on this page, can I just ask you to look at paragraph 7.47, second sentence. Evacuation can be made more resource intensive if the occupants have an impaired ability to make their own way to safety, for example, disabled persons, or those under the effect of alcohol or drugs may need greater assistance. Again, would you expect, as at the time of the fire, would you expect an incident commander to be able easily to put his or her hands on information that would assist them in evacuating the building partially or fully if that were needed?
What are you saying? If there's impaired ability to make their own way out to safety?
Yes.
Yes. So the information should be available to the incident commander in that situation should they need to consider an evacuation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, can I just go back to something else that you referred to in the earlier part of your evidence this morning, and that was computer-based training post-Lacma House. Can I ask you to be shown LFB quadruple 03751? And I think this is actually the monitoring and action plan that came in as a result of Lacma House. Can I just ask you, first of all, are you familiar with this document or anything like it?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I'll take this very briefly. Can I just ask you to look at paragraph 3, which is on, I think, the next page, page 2. Sorry, page, fish around in this, page 3. I'm so sorry. Right. This is about incident command training. And if we just enlarge it, if you look at paragraph 3, subparagraph 3, paragraph 3 starts, the brigade review its policies and procedures concerning incident command, having regard to whether it's effective for the choice of IC to be tied closely to the number of types of appliances, attending an incident and training to be given to ICs to enhance their training in relation to the following. Okay, and then if you look at 3, to anticipate that a fire might behave in a manner inconsistent with the compartmentation principle. Now, you can then see across the page that there's some text, quite a lot of text, about how that was going to be implemented by Babcock with management training, and in the last paragraph of the first main column, underneath the yellow, it says the Lacma House training package that specifically addressed the recommendations is formally managed by the learning and development team directly with Babcock. First of all, Babcock, can you tell us about their involvement in LFB training?
Babcock are an independent provider of our training.
Right.
So they're an independent company that we pay to provide our training.
Right. And do their training teams comprise members or ex-members of the LFB?
Yes, they can do,
They
yes.
do. Do they? They can do, but do they?
Well, certain teams have got ex-members of LFB, and it's quite a big department or team, so yes.
Do you remember does this prompt a recollection of getting computer-based training from Babcock on the subject of what would happen if compartmentation fails?
No, that document doesn't. I'm not familiar with that document.
Okay. You're not familiar with the document. Okay. Right, well, I won't pursue that. It's a long and complicated document and not an easy read, but we may look at that with others. Can I then turn back to where we had got to just before break, which is your arrival at the brigade control centre. Now, in your statement, you say 2/3 of the way down page 5. Just below halfway down page 5, just where the paragraph starts. At 01:49 hours, I called the recall DAC, Lee Drawbridge, and told him that he was to stand up as the recall DAC. Now, you say 01:49 hours. How can you be so precise about the timing of that call? Do you know?
Because Lee Drawbridge informed me afterwards that he'd had missed calls on his phone, and that was the time that I called him.
So when you did your statement, where did you get that very precise information from? Do you know?
From Lee Drawbridge.
Who told you that? What was he looking at to give you that?
His mobile phone.
Oh, I see. His call log on.
I've either got it off my mobile phone or from Lee Drawbridge saying that that's the time I called him.
I see. Okay. Have you provided your mobile phone records to the police?
Yes.
You did? Okay. Right. Now, you say, I couldn't get through it first, and when he called me back, the incident was made up to 40 pumps with many SG calls in progress. Looking at the short incident log as we have, and we saw that 40 pumps was at 02:03, thereabouts, that would mean, that this discussion you had with Lee Drawbridge was after that. So we can time that discussion to after 02:03, can we?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And you asked him, you say, to log on and see if he could contact the Operational Resilience Support Officer, also, and mobilise them to the BCC. What is an also?
So an Operation Resilience Support Officer are watch managers who are trained in setting up the BCC, Brigade Coordination Centre, and they would be in charge of particular cells, or, as mentioned before, or they would assist in whatever role was required in the BCC. So they're, they're very good officers to get there early because they will assist in setting a BCC up. And knowing I was doing it at Stratford, which isn't a location normally, I wanted to get them there as quick as possible.
Right. And would there be particular people with current operational fireground experience?
They're operational watch managers. Right. However, they are not working currently at a fire station, so they wouldn't be attending incidents at the moment, but they would work in a department up at headquarters. But they are qualified to the role of a watch manager. Right.
And did you succeed in mobilising an also to the BCC?
Lee would have mobilised those alsos for me, yes.
Who were they, do you know?
There was 4 that came all together, but 2 to start with. They are on my list in my statement. So, to be honest, I can't remember which 2 came first.
Right. You say you've referred to them in your statement?
Yes. So, in my statement, it says the staff that I had in the BCC.
Okay. Now, you then go on to say that you arrived... If you go to page 3 of your statement, that's what I was looking for. Page 3 of your statement, there's a little list.
There's the list of names, yes.
So we've got 4 watch managers: Wilson, Small, Malone, and Rex. And they were the 4, weren't they?
Yes, they were the 4. So Steve Leader would have arrived first. Lee Drawbridge would have mobilised the 2 that were on recall that night. So there was only 2 on recall. and then later on, at some stage in the that night, I authorised for the two who were not on recall to be contacted at home off duty and ask if they were willing to step up and come in off duty, which they did.
Yeah. Then you go on to say, 2/3 of the way down page 5, the journey to Stratford from my camp-out base is only 20 to 25 minutes, depending on traffic. Between 0200 hours and 0220 hours, I arrived at Stratford Fire Station. We've discussed that before.
Yes.
On the basis of what I've shown you, do you still think that's correct? It looks like it was after 0204, though.
Yes, so I arrived after Joanne Smith,
Right.
and unfortunately I can't pinpoint my arrival at Stratford to a specific time because obviously I wasn't looking at my watch at the time.
So Joanne Smith was there when you arrived?
Yes.
Okay. And she says that she'd arrived about 2:15 or so. So would that help you be more accurate as to your timings?
So it would have been after 2:15 then, because Joe was already there and up in control and in the room when I arrived.
Okay. And do you remember whether Joe had been there for long or she'd just arrived or what?
I couldn't be very specific, but I think she'd probably been there 10, 15 minutes.
What was she doing when you arrived? Do you remember?
She was talking to her control officers. She was working the room, going round the room and speaking to her control officers at the time.
Okay. Now, you say at the bottom of the page, in the middle of the room was Officer of the Day, Jason Olive, who was on the phone, and Senior Operations Manager Joanne Smith, who was going around the room speaking to call operators trying to assist and support her staff. That's what you saw, is it, when you first went into the control room?
For those two particular officers, yes.
Yeah. Do you remember who was Officer of the Watch?
Yes, Alex Norman.
Alex Norman.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And what do you remember was her role when you arrived?
I can't remember where she was or what she was doing at the time. So I would always go to the most senior person in the room to start with, and that's how I remember looking around, looking for Joanne and seeing where she was. And also Jason would have been the only other operational officer in the room other than control officers. So that's probably why I pinpointed those two officers to start with.
Right. Now, at the top of page 6 of your statement, you say this: after introducing myself, I told them that I was going to set up the BCC downstairs on the ground floor. You say you introduced yourself. Did you know Joe Smith?
Yes, I know Joe Smith and Jason Olive, so
Right.
I know them both.
Right, okay.
So I've worked with Joe previously.
Okay. And you say you were going to set up the BCC downstairs, but you then go on to say, my role was to set up the BCC, but I could see my priority now was going to be assist with coordination of FSG calls and control. And the priority was to record all the fire survival guidance information without it being lost or duplicated. Why did you see that as your priority? So,
if I set a bit of a scene of when I've arrived. So I've arrived at Stratford. Stratford Control's on the first floor, and the BCC, or it's not a specific BCC, but it's the North East Area team offices, but it can facilitate a BCC should you require it. So first of all, I've gone straight upstairs to inform Joe, just as common courtesy, to say I'm here, and I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to start setting up the Brigade Coordination Centre, as was my role and what I was paged and mobilised to do. When I entered the room, so Stratford Control is a smaller room than Merton. The footprint is a smaller room, and the noise level, you could see that every single operator was fully engaged in the time when I first walked in. Didn't realise were FSGs, but was fully engaged on the phone, on the radio, or everyone was fully engaged and working. And there was quite a lot of noise in the room, controlled, but it was a noisy. You could see it was an active room, and there was a massive amount of information coming in. And seeing that once I gained the information that they were they were dealing with the vast number of FSG calls, and my concern was to look at a system and assist Jo in her role, and look at a system of how we could record and get the information across to the fireground as the most expedient way.
Right. And in coming to that conclusion that FSG information and its recording it accurately was your priority, were you drawing on any prior experience?
So I've had no prior experience of working in control and dealing with FSGs, but I could just see the pure amount of information coming in. Normal protocol would be for this information to go over the airwave radio. I can probably looking at the amount of airtime traffic that would have taken for all that information to be passed over the airwave, and that would release another operator to do another role rather than concentrating and sending that over the airwave to the fireground. Right. And also it would give everyone a visual picture in the room, having it up on a whiteboard that everyone could see what the information was on the board and the numbers of calls we were receiving.
Yes. Now, by 2 a.m. or so, the number of FSG calls that had been received by the control room, it was over 115. Did you know that?
No.
Would that surprise you?
Yes,
number?
That's a hell of a lot, yes.
Yes, hell of a lot. And when you arrived in the control room and you could see all the CROs busy on the phone, did you form an impression as to whether those were active FSG calls, properly so called, or whether they were just what I might call ordinary 999 calls? No,
I would say they were active FSG calls.
How did you know that?
Just the information I gathered straight away from Jo and looking round the room and seeing. So I went straight to Jo first of all so I didn't walk into the room and just make that decision. There was some information gathering. I spoke to Jo first. She told me what was happening, where we were, and looking at the situation at the time, that was a decision that I made. But having spoken to Jo and at that time Alex Norman on what my view of what we could do, gleaming on their experience, because they are the experienced control staff, and they were happy with that decision, so then we moved that forward.
How was the FSG information being recorded at the time you arrived?
Normal protocols, which would have been from a control operator passing it to a radio operator who would have put it onto the system and spoken to the fireground.
Right. Just pause there and let's just break that up and look at it a bit more closely. So when you arrived, normal system in operation, what was the control room operator doing, him or herself, to record the information that they were getting?
Which control room operator?
Well, in general, all of them.
So they were at the time they were writing on pieces of paper.
Right. And was that a standard form of pad, or was it just a bit of paper by the
No,
by the
they
phone?
were the pieces of paper that you showed me, or part of the pieces of paper that you showed me earlier on.
And so they wrote that down during the call or after the call was concluded? Do you know?
Couldn't give you that detail.
Okay. And what you could see, what were they doing? What were the control room operators doing with those pieces of paper?
At that time, I don't know.
Okay. Did you see them getting up from their desks and taking the pieces of paper to somebody?
No.
Do you know how those pieces of paper were being collected at the time of your arrival from the control room operators?
Not at my time of arrival, no.
How, at the time of your arrival, was the information which was being gathered by the CROs from callers being communicated to the radio operator?
Unfortunately, I can't give you that information because that's a control operator. That's a role within control, and I'm not sure how control would, or their systems, how they would do that. Okay. So,
do you know whether it was? Do you know? And I think whether it was by typing it into the system and sending it to the radio operator?
I would suggest so, yes.
Right, but do you know that?
No, not 100%, because I don't work with the control operators and I don't have a complex understanding of how a control operator would work. I have a basic understanding, but I'm not trained to, or I've not gone through the control operator's role.
And were you at the point of arrival, before the whiteboard system started, let me ask it this way, how was each FSG message being communicated to the fireground?
I would suggest that was being done by the airwave radio.
Right. You say you would suggest it. Did you see it?
No, everyone, the room, so if I set you the scene, you've got the room, every single operator is on either a headset with a phone call or a headset for the radio. I wouldn't be able to tell you that's the radio operator, that's a FSG operator, that I don't know their roles and where they sit and how they work. So you're drilling, for my level, probably too far down into the detail for me to give you a confirmed answer, probably.
Fair enough. Okay. Was anybody making sure, at the point of your arrival, that FSG information wasn't being lost or duplicated?
Yes, I would definitely say so, and you would need to speak to a control operator to confirm that.
Right.
Something broken.
Can I just ask for a momentary pause?
You want to pause? Yes, of course.
No, there's a...
No, I think some of the some of the screens aren't scrolling.
Okay, let's stop the pause.
Yeah, right, Mr. Willett, carry on.
Yes, I see. Okay. Were you aware of any calls coming in from other control rooms?
Not at that period of time, no.
Did there come a point later in the evening when you became aware?
Yes, later on in the evening, Joe Smith informed me that other control rooms were supporting us.
Did she tell you how many?
No.
Okay. Did she tell you which?
No. But like I say, that wouldn't have come under my remit or under my role.
Right.
Joe was just giving me the overview so I had an understanding of what was happening.
Right. When a message was sent from the control room to the incident ground at the point you arrived, do you know how the fact that that message had been sent was being recorded?
No.
Did you know whether it was being recorded?
I would suggest that it would have gone onto our system as in normal protocol with how control work, but as I've explained previously, I'm not trained in that arena and I wouldn't have that understanding of how they would normally record their systems, but I do know that fire survival guidance would be recorded on a system that they use.
Okay. And at the point of your arrival, did you have access, either downstairs or in the control room, to the vision system?
I would never have access to vision because vision is controls and I wouldn't have access to that. Should I had wanted to leave the control room and go and find a remote computer somewhere to log on and then log on and have a look, yes, I could have looked onto BOSS if that was what I needed to do.
Okay. Given that you had decided that your priority was to assist with coordination of FSG calls in control and to record the FSG information, was it not important to you to log on to Vision and see what messages had already been sent and recorded in that system, so as to get a picture of the flow of information and the detail?
So I was aware that FSGs were going on. I was aware that Control were recording them in however they would normally record them, and I offered an alternative system due to the multitude and number that was happening, to try and relieve the pressure in the room to make sure that it was more streamlined for the number and the amount coming through. I wouldn't have the understanding, like I've said previously, of how or where or what Control do, because it's not a role I perform.
No. Did anybody say to you, Joe Smith or Jason Olive, for example, the system we're using at the moment to record information being sent to the incident commander is not working?
No, no one said at any time it wasn't working.
So was the solution that you'd come up with to use whiteboards that was a solution to, was that a solution to a problem that you were facing, or not?
It was just a solution I offered up to the room as the way we could deal with the vast number that was coming in, and to try and assist with keeping that data going through that one channel. So Jason was on the mobile phone at the time, and that is when I came up with the idea of him standing with these whiteboards and to write all the information on the whiteboards as he was relaying it to the incident ground.
Right. You came up with the solution, but my question is really, was there a problem to which this was a solution?
No, not that I'm aware that there was a problem, apart from the vast amount and number that was coming in, and potentially, I suppose you could say there was a potential for control staff to become overwhelmed.
Right.
With the number to come in. It was a solution that I put forward, and it was a solution that was agreed with between me, Joe and Alex, and in their experience as control operators, if they're happy with that, then I would work on their experience, and I was happy to proceed it.
Do you know whether Joe Smith or Alex Norman or Jason Oliff, for that matter, informed the control room staff generally that the new whiteboard system was going to be used to record FSG information being sent to the fireground?
Yes, so that would have been something that Joe and Alex would have informed her staff that that's the process we were starting to do.
Do you know whether the radio operator was specifically told to stop sending messages to the fireground?
I couldn't give you I wouldn't know the detail of who or what individual they spoke to at the time.
Okay.
So I couldn't drill into that depth of detail for you.
And at that early stage, after you'd arrived, seen the control room, talked to Joe Smith and Jason Oliff, did you know or get a feel for the kind of advice that was being given by control room operators to callers?
I was aware at that time the advice was to stay put.
Right.
But I didn't listen into a call or stand with an operator at that stage and listen to the call that they were giving.
When you say you were aware that the advice was to stay put, but didn't listen to a call or stand with an operator, how were you aware that that was the nature of the advice?
I couldn't give you a specific who told me, but I would take an assumption that it would have been Joanne who told me at the time.
Right. I was going to ask you, was it an assumption you made, or was it something you think Joe Smith told you?
No, that would have been part of our discussion and the discussion that we would have had.
Right. Okay, part of the discussion. And in part of that discussion, which discussed stay put, what was the actual nature of the advice that Joe Smith told you was being imparted? Was it stay put at all costs, or stay put if you can?
No, there was no detail. She wouldn't have given me the detail of the advice. That's the control's role and her role. She just told me that she was keeping stay put where the advice as it was. And I'd say I can't remember that actual conversation. I'm just saying that is how I would take the assumption I got that information.
Right. Just help me with something. Stay put is, you explained what that was in your statement, and you told us earlier this morning. But if someone's trapped in their flat and is getting FSG, fire survival guidance, they haven't got a choice, have they? They have to stay put because they can't get out.
Yeah, depending on the circumstances, if they are trapped in their flat but it depends on what calls, and so there was numerous calls that went on that night, and like I said, I didn't get involved in the detail of what control operators or what their advice they were giving at that stage, so I wouldn't know the detail of any of the calls. I've not listened to any of the calls.
No. Did Joe Smith tell you that, about the general flavour of the advice that was being given?
I would say
as part of the stay put advice.
I would say not at that stage, because we're talking at the very early stages of me probably walking through the door.
Right. Could you just help with something then in general from your experience and training? We have stay put as a concept, and we have FSG as a concept. At what point in the development of a fire or a caller's experience of a fire, does the advice become fire survival guidance advice?
So stay put advice, fire survival guidance is given when a individual is trapped within their premise, their flat, their house, wherever they are, through smoke, heat, or fire.
Right. So would it mean that, as a matter of logic at least, in your experience, you wouldn't be giving or need to give stay put advice to someone who was trapped because they were put anyway?
No, stay put and fire survival are different.
Yeah. Yeah. So fire survival guidance is not given to someone who needs to be told to stay put. It's given to someone who can't escape, even if
Yes.
they wanted to.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Or is it a case of someone who says he can't escape?
Yes, it depends.
right. So, is survival, just working this through a bit more and drawing on your experience, if we may, when a fire survival guidance call is in process, is some or all of that an attempt by the operator to work out whether or not there is a safe means of escape, or is it simply advice as to how to survive in circumstances where there is no escape?
So you're talking of specific training for a call operator and what a call operator's advice and what they give.
Yeah.
I've no input or had no training in what a call operator or what their advice they would give. That's a control role.
Right. But going back then to the discussion you had with Jo Smith, and you got the impression from her at least that she was saying that the advice was stay put. I'm just trying to work out what that meant to you.
In what context?
Well, in the context of your arrival, lots of FSG calls in progress, your concern that you needed to prioritise them, and your discussion with Jo Smith. In that context...
So, as I said, I can't remember a specific conversation or discussion, as I previously said, with Jo.
Right.
I'm taking the assumption that that's where I gained that information. So there was a lot happening within a short period of time. The control room's very, very busy. There was a lot of conversations and a lot of information flying around. And I'm just saying that somewhere or somehow I was aware that we were still given, or that we were still following the stay put advice.
Right. And you were still following the stay put advice, and I'm sorry to keep worrying
Or controller.
And what did that mean in practice, still following the stay put advice?
So this again is an assumption, because I don't know what control would say or how they would speak to staff, because I'm not a control officer and it's not an environment I would normally work in. So I'm taking the assumption that if this was someone who was in their flat and that they were phoning up to say that they could see there was smoke outside their window or something, control would still be in the position of saying, stay where you are, the fire service will come to you.
Right. Okay.
But you're asking me to give details of something that probably I'm not privy to, and I wasn't aware of that detail on the night.
So, no, but I am asking you about your actual understanding
Yes.
on the actual night.
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking, from what you've just told us, that from your discussions with Jo Smith and from what you understood, the advice was still, you are going to be rescued?
Yes.
Right.
At that stage.
At that stage.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so can we take it then, and this may be fair or unfair, that the expression stay put advice is shorthand for you are going to be rescued?
You're safer to stay in your compartment, and if and when, if necessary, the fire service will come to you. However, every circumstance is different.
Yeah.
And as I said, so in a normal flat high-rise situation, the fire wouldn't be leaving the compartment as it did on the night, and it wouldn't be spreading around the envelope of the building as it did in the night. And so normal stay put advice would be the advice to begin.
Would it be perhaps fairer to say that the stay put advice is an answer to the question by the person who's calling, should I stay where I am or should I try to get out?
Yes.
Having described the conditions in the immediate area.
Yes. But as I say, I can't give specifics on each individual conversation or each call. As you said, there were absolutely numerous calls on that night, and I wasn't aware of the detail of each conversation or any of the conversations held.
No, you've made that very clear. It's just I think we're seeking to get an understanding of what you understood at that moment of what stay put meant, and you've answered the chairman's question. And we'll come back to it in due course. Can I just ask you this? Were you aware, on or around the time of your arrival at the Brigade Control Centre, that the incident ground had asked for a dangerous structure engineer to be called?
I was made aware, I think it is logged and minuted quite a bit further down through the following morning. I couldn't give you a specific time, but not at that stage, no.
Well, I can. If you go, please, to the short incident log, tab 23, and go, please, to page 22. At 02:17:36, you see, Mr. Fenton, we have a service request. EMG CU8 request dangerous structure engineer, gas and electricity board, and local authority liaison officer. Now, leave aside gas and electricity and the LALO. Does this log entry prompt a recollection?
So I wouldn't, as the DAC for the Brigade Coordination Centre, that is not information that would be given to me, and it's not information that I'd be expected to know. That is for the operational staff or officers on the fire ground, and that be a request that comes to control for control to utilise the request and make sure that they got a dangerous structure engineer to the incident ground. So it's not information that I would have been given. It's not within my role.
Okay. Taking it in stages. First of all, why would an incident commander request a dangerous structure engineer?
You'd have to ask the incident commander that.
You've been an incident commander, I am assuming, in your long career at the LFB.
Yes, but I can't answer what their rationale was, what their thinking was, and why they, as an individual, requested that. You would have to ask the individual who requested it.
Well, my question was, why would an incident commander request a dangerous structure engineer? So perhaps I could put it slightly differently. In any given circumstances, at any given fire, why would any given incident commander in the LFB request a dangerous structure engineer?
Because they would have concerns over the structure of the building.
Right.
So that's why they would request one.
Okay.
Potentially.
And what would that tell you? What would the fact that the incident commander had concerns over the structure of the building tell you about the seriousness of the fire and the consequences for the people still in the building?
So, as I said earlier on, I wasn't aware of this information, and I wouldn't have been given that information in the role that I was performing.
No.
It wouldn't have come to me.
Now, it doesn't answer my question, I'm afraid, Mr. Fenton. My question is...
So was this a hypothetical question rather than specific to the night?
It is a hypothetical question, but what I'm trying to gauge is, using your experience, what that information would tell the control room about the seriousness of the fire and the consequences for the people still in the building.
So it would tell control, as limited as that is just a line of information they've been given, it would tell control that there's potential concerns with the structure of the building. But in what levels or how, to what stage, I don't think a control operator would perceive, and also a control operator would be there to facilitate the request. So it's a request to our admin control operator asking for a dangerous structure engineer. So then they would have gone onto the system and ordered or found a dangerous structure engineer to attend the incident.
You say you didn't know about that message, but would that have been useful information to you in recording and taking charge of fire survival guidance?
It's a piece of information that I could have known about, but like I say, the role of the night, I wouldn't have said I took charge of the fire survival guidance. I said we put a system in place jointly, me and Joe, on how the fire survival guidance could be recorded. The fire survival guidance would have remained in control. We were just looking at a system of how we could make sure it got to the fire ground the quickest way and was recorded efficiently on the board.
Now, on page 8 of your statement, just below halfway down, sorry, I'm so sorry, a third of the way down, it said, at 03:20 hours, Control received an informative from the incident ground requesting a dangerous structure engineer as soon as possible. Was that the first time you learnt that the incident ground requested a dangerous structure engineer?
Yes, that was, and if I remember rightly, the reason I was informed of it was I happy for the dangerous structure engineer to be blue lighted. So the decision that came to me as the BCC was I happy for a blue light to have the authorising for it to be blue lighted to the incident ground.
When you learnt that a dangerous structure engineer had been requested, did that affect your thinking as to the seriousness of the fire and the consequences for the occupants of the building at that time?
At 03:20, and I'm taking the assumption that's the time on there. So the seriousness of the fire and I was already aware of the development of the situation by then.
Yeah, I'm going slightly backwards in this. You say at 3:20 the Control received an informative from the incident ground. What is that?
It's a request. So it's an information message. Basically, it's a request from the incident to Control. So anything that the incident ground requests, they will send a message into Control. So as soon as possible. So I'm taking the assumption they were already asked for a dangerous structure engineer, and that's where they've asked for it to be blue lighted to the incident ground, yes, which I authorised.
And to be fair to you, if you go to page 24 of the SIL, short incident log, tab 23 of the documents bundle, and turn to page 24 and look at the time mark for 3:15:32, you can see that there the radio operator creates a key, EMG CU8 request urgent attendance of dangerous structure engineer and stress this is a matter of urgency and priority. Is that the informative message that you're referring to in your statement?
I can't remember where and exactly time or what message. My memory of that night was that I was asked, was I happy for a dangerous structure engineer, as I've said, to be blue lighted to the incident, okay, which I authorised immediately.
Right. Do you know, maybe you don't, but can you help us with why you would have learnt about the need for a dangerous structure engineer at 3:20 as per that message at 3:15, but not the one at...
Because, as I said, my role has been in charge of the BCC. It wasn't... I wouldn't have been informed of every message and messages coming from the fire ground.
Right. So did somebody at 3:20 tell you that the incident ground wanted a dangerous structure engineer, or were you looking at the radio?
No, someone requested. So someone physically, as I said, came up to me, whether I was in control or the BCC, and physically requested, was I happy to authorise for the dangerous structure engineer to be blue lighted to the incident ground, which, as I said, I authorised and said yes.
I see, okay. So, Okay. You then say, if you go back to page 6 of your statement, that, and this is 4 lines down, that you identified 2 whiteboards. You say, I dragged them to the corner of the room and spoke to Jason Duff, that should be Olif, I
yes,
imagine.
that's a typo.
Who was on the phone to a command unit at the time. And then you say, once off the phone, I briefed him to keep a phone line open to the command unit regarding the fire survival guidance calls. I told him to sit by the boards and we would bring the information to him. He would then write the information on the boards and tell the command unit at the same time. Just pausing there. Was that the totality of your instruction to Jason Olif?
No, that's me writing it. I gave him a brief of what he was to do, where he was to sit, how, and the reason why we were doing it, and to keep an open line at all times, and that he was to be the sole person that the information was to go through.
Okay. It looks from the way you phrased this that he was already using the phone system to speak to the command unit before the system of whiteboard recording was established. Is that right?
Jason Olif was on the phone at the time. I'm not 100% sure what information or what that conversation was, but that is when I said to keep that open line with their command unit.
Right. But my question was really that is it the case that, from what you could see, he was already using the phone system
I can't confirm
to speak to the command unit before the whiteboard
he was speaking
system
to
was
the command unit.
established?
Sorry, I overspoke. Sorry.
I'll just put the question again. From what you could see, was he already using a phone to speak to the command unit and pass on messages to the command unit before the whiteboard recording system was established?
So yes, he was on the phone. I can confirm that. I can't confirm what his conversation was with the command unit and what he was passing over to them. No, I can't.
And your reference to phone, what kind of phone was that?
That would be his brigade mobile.
Right. Okay. And do you know how long, maybe you don't, but could you see or tell or know how long he had been using his mobile to speak to the fireground before the whiteboard instruction, as it were, was given, before you told him to start using the whiteboards?
No, the room was, like I said, the room was so busy, every single person was on a different phone or a headset. I wasn't standing next to Jason and that was far from my priorities to see how long he was on the phone or who he was on the phone to. Right.
Do you know which command unit he was speaking to?
At that time, no.
No. Did you know?
CU7. So at a later date, he confirmed with me that he was speaking to CU7. That's when the dry whiteboard or the whiteboard was set up and that system was in play.
Right. Did you know whether he ever spoke to anybody on CU8?
No, I can't confirm who he's spoken to or who he didn't know.
Okay. Just going back to the short incident log, at page 22, we have a key message at 02:23:33. Just after the dangerous structure engineer, actually. 02:22:33. That's wrong. Sorry, my fault. 02:23:33. And that says, CU run all FSG calls via CU7. Do you think, do you remember that message being sent to, being input into the system?
No, because I had no access, as I said, to the messages and I wasn't looking at the messages.
Right. Do you think, did you know, even if not by looking at the system, that message had been sent and that now FSG calls had to go via CU7?
No.
Okay. I mean, 02:23:33 is either at the time you arrived or shortly after, I think, the time you arrived. So do you remember any messages going to CU8 at all?
No, I wouldn't have been aware of who was talking to who.
Okay. Now, when you saw Jason Olif using his mobile to speak to the command unit, was that normal procedure or was that not normal procedure?
It wouldn't be a normal procedure for what we would, for an FSG, that would have, like I said, gone through. In normal procedure for fire survival guidance, me and Jason wouldn't even be in the room. We wouldn't even be there.
No.
So it would solely be in control who would have dealt with fire survival guidance. Due to the unprecedented number, the scale of the incident, that's when the BCC was put into place, and hence we were there. Due to them being overwhelmed and the number coming in, that's when I decided that I would help and assist wherever I could at the time, because that was obviously the priority.
And seeing Jason Olive on the mobile, did that trigger a thought in your mind about whether the calls he was making would be recorded?
At what stage? When I first came in, or when the dry whiteboard was set up?
When you saw him on his phone to the command unit, as you say in your statement at page 6, fifth line down. You say you spoke to Jason Duff, who was on the phone to a command unit. You told us it was a mobile. My question is, did you have any thoughts about whether his calls would be recorded?
Not at that time, because his conversation, I don't know what his conversation would, it wouldn't be necessarily a recordable conversation.
No. Did you know that brigade mobile telephone calls are not recorded?
Yes,
Right.
I am aware of that.
And did that fact influence your decision to establish the whiteboard recording system?
Not at the time, no. At the time, it was just purely how can we prioritise the calls and get them over to the incident ground.
As you said. And do you remember whether Alex Norman was still talking to the incident ground?
I can't recall what individual officers were doing in such a dynamic situation and a dynamic room. I wouldn't be able to recall where she was or what she was doing.
Right. Can I just take you to your contemporaneous notes, which we read into the number of which we read into the record at the beginning of your evidence this morning? And can I show you page 3? Second paragraph on that page. And you describe the instruction you gave to Jason Olive to sit by the boards whilst keeping an open line with the CU. You say, I recall it was CU7. All FSG information was then recorded on the whiteboards whilst JO relayed this information to the CU. This ensured no information was lost and went via one dedicated route, ensuring no duplication or confusion. Now, just to be clear, were you satisfied, having set up that system, that there was no duplication, no parallel provision of information to the fireground?
At that time, I was not aware that it was going via any other form.
Did you subsequently become aware that it might have done?
Only after seeing the inquiry to when Joe was in here recently.
I see. Okay, well, let's just finish that little point off, and then maybe we can have a break, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I think so.
Right. If you go to the short incident log, we'll pick it up from 02-23-33 on page 22, which says CU7 run all FSGs by CU7. We've still got calls being recorded, messages being recorded, such as, for example, at 02-25-32, we have service request completed for flat 183, and then at 02-27, we've got service request created for flat 94, which is completed 4 seconds later by Sharon Darby, and then going on we've got at 02-29 a service request created for flat 142, which is completed at 2:31, and indeed at 2:41 we've got 2:40:11 we've got a service request created for flat 152, which is completed at 02:41. Just looking at the timings, do you think that those services messages were being completed and created while Jason Olive was on the phone to the command unit?
I would suggest the dry whiteboard was definitely set up at that period of time. However, these logs on here, I can't confirm control have entered them, whether they've entered them for recording purposes or I'm not sure. So I wouldn't, as far as I was concerned, all information was coming via Jason, via the board and going to the fireground.
Right. To be fair to you, the references to CU8 in those instances I've shown you, I asked Miss Smith about, and she confirmed that actually that was CU7, and that in fact
Okay.
the messages that had been sent by Sharon Darby were CU7, and we verified that by reference to the records of those messages.
Right.
But does it? But even having told you that, does it surprise you to see that these messages are being sent at that time
I wasn't aware
by radio?
I wasn't aware they were being duplicated and sent by radio.
Okay. Now, the idea was, as we've seen from your contemporaneous notes, that all FSG information, as it says, all FSG information was to be recorded on the whiteboards, whilst Jason Olive relayed that information to the command unit. Do you know how the command unit would have recorded that information at the other end?
I would have, no, I'll be surmising, so no, I didn't at the time, no. And I wouldn't have known because that's on the incident ground and remote to where I am.
Right. Okay. Did you ask Jason Earliff or Joe Smith how they thought the information was being recorded in the command unit?
No, because that would have been down to the commander, not the incident commander, but the commander, whoever was in charge of that part of on the incident ground.
Right. Now, going back to, if I can, go back to your contemporaneous note, page 3, where we were looking before at the second paragraph. And just below the second paragraph, you've got 4 bullet points. Information recorded was the flat numbers and floor they were on, and then the amount of people that were inside the flat, adult/child, progress and updates from the calls coming in, and advice that was given by the control staff. Now, when you say information recorded was, is that a reference to the actual information that was recorded, or is that a reference to what was intended by the system you established?
That was the intention of the system.
Did it succeed?
So the information went across to the fireground. Some of the information possibly didn't go onto the board, but the board wasn't a reference. It was only a reference point to know that that information had gone across to the fireground.
Can we look at the whiteboards, which you will find in the master documents bundle at tabs excuse me, tabs 68 and 69. And just to orientate you in terms of your recollection, we've set them up now on duplicate split the screen here. The one with the one on the left, I think, is in fact the one that was done second, and the one on the right was the one that was done first. So you'll have to read right to left, if that's all right. First of all, do you remember who held the pen for the whiteboard?
So Jason Oliff would have predominantly scribed on the board and done the writing. However, there were occasions that other staff, while Jason was on the phone, put information up while Jason relayed that information to the fireground.
Right, and Joe Smith told us on Thursday, I think it was, last week, that way on the right-hand screen you see 193, 22nd floor, 10 people in green. She put that up there. She was very definitive about that. Do you remember that?
I would not remember any specific entries because I wasn't standing next to the board to put them up. However, I do know that Joe and other staff did participate and scribe on the board, but I would say 95% was Jason Olive. However, other staff did participate.
How much of this process did you actually see going on in terms of the information coming from the control room operators to the whiteboard and then the whiteboard being inscribed?
Predominantly my time was spent in control. However, I did go down to the BCC at times to facilitate some of the parts in the BCC, and I did spend a lot of my time, I'm not sure if we're aware of the layout of the room, but standing by the what could we call it? The officer of the watch's desk, I think is probably the best terminology. The head desk, or
right,
where the officer of the watch stand.
And that was Alex Norman, as you said.
Sorry?
That was Alex Norman.
Yes,
Right.
Alex Norman's the officer of the watch.
Right, okay. So there's a head desk which has phones on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. I think one of them is a red phone. Do you remember that?
It's a critical phone, yes.
Right. Did that ring when you were there?
I can't. Loads of all phones were ringing because I don't answer the phones, or I wouldn't have picked one up, or I wouldn't have known.
Okay. I mean, there is some evidence from Miss Gotts in her statement, who remembers that red phone rang incessantly.
Miss who? Sorry.
Gotts.
Gotts.
No. Right. Okay. Does the name not mean anything?
No.
Right. Okay. All right. Never mind that. Do you remember the red phone ringing incessantly?
Like I say, I wasn't necessarily standing next to where the red phone were, and there was numerous phones and a lot of noise in the room, and I wouldn't have picked up on any particular one phone ringing more than any other.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier about the process by which the information comes to Jason Olive, or perhaps Joe Smith or other staff writing on the whiteboard, and you said it was through these pieces of paper which we looked at right at the beginning of your evidence.
Yes.
Did those pieces of paper come to you at all?
No.
Right. So did you have a good view from where you were standing by the head table of those pieces of paper being carried across the room to Jason Olive by the whiteboard?
I saw pieces of paper coming across the room. And like I say, to set the scene, the room is very dynamic, it's busy at the time. I'm receiving numerous phone calls. I'm being asked to make decisions by several different people in different directions. And so my vision or overview of standing by the board or watching, numerous different staff took pieces of paper across the room to Jason. But who and how, I know Alex did at times, I know Joanne did at times.
Right.
And to be honest, probably right at the beginning, I probably took a couple of bits over to Jason just purely to get it up and running as a runner.
Right. Did you have any designated runners during the course of the
There
night?
was no staff. Everyone had a role. Everyone was constant. Everyone was on the phone, dealing with the calls coming in. That, like I said, every single person in that room was fully engaged in a role or a job.
Do you remember whether any control room operators themselves took their headsets off and ran across the room with a piece of paper to Jason?
A control operator, I saw control operators taking them across too, but whether they were, what role they were doing at the time and who they were, I couldn't give you that detail.
Now, when the whiteboard system was it started in blank with the first entry, which I think is 82 11th floor, being written up in response to a specific piece of paper, or was it started in response to a batch of information which was sitting there and then recorded as a list?
Yet again, I couldn't give you that. I wasn't standing with Jason directly when he started, so I detailed him to set the board up and left him to perform that role. And Joe and Alex would tell the control room staff that that's the process and what we're doing.
Right. And can you just help me with okay, maybe again you can't, but the order of things. The information comes on a piece of paper
Yes.
to Jason Olive. He then writes it on the whiteboard.
Yep.
Does he then he then communicates it by mobile phone? Does he?
So he had an open line, an open phone, and he's continuously doing that as he's writing the information up on the board. Or, as I said, on occasions, when someone came over, they would highlight the piece of paper to him, the information, and they'd write it on the board for him, as just purely as a scribe.
Right. And what about repeat calls? What if there was a second or third or fourth call to the control room where there'd been a development of the fire or heat or smoke in the flat, or a change in the advice? Would that get recorded on the whiteboard?
So would have been made aware of repeat calls, as I say, and I'm sorry, sometimes as my role I would have been standing back and overseeing what was going on and dealing with the BCC. So I wouldn't have known if there were repeat calls and how they would have put them on the board. So if if a control operator went over to Jason and said, this is a repeat call, if there was an upgrade on that call, then he would have passed that information over.
Okay. For example, can I just put one example to you? Page ME, we can go to this, MET 000017390, page 12. We've got a message which says flat 204, 23rd floor, one person. Just note the expression one person. And then when you go back to the whiteboard, the left-hand whiteboard, it says 204, just 4 up from the bottom.
Sorry, which board are you looking at?
Left-hand whiteboard.
Yeah.
4 up from the bottom. 204, 23rd floor, one disabled male. So it looks as if the message, one person, has evolved into something more detailed, one disabled male. Can you help with how those messages evolved, or that message might have evolved in that way, using that as an example?
So, as I said earlier, and that's making an assumption that a control operator has now come, or a piece of paper's come back over to Jason on the board, and the information is now been updated from the previous time, and so he's updated the board and would have passed that information over to the command unit.
Right. And this is a question I suppose I should have asked him, but do you remember whether he deleted information or rubbed it off the board and replaced it with fresh information as it came in to him?
I couldn't answer what he actually done.
Do you remember whether that happened?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, it says one disabled male and the previous said one adult male, so I would take the assumption that that's been changed and updated.
Right, okay. All right. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much.
Right.
We're going to have another break now, Mr. Fenton. I have to ask you again not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it over the break, and we'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. I'd like to go to the usher. Thank you. Good. 2 o'clock then, please.